first of all, thank you, and thank you for sharing your amazing creative energy, and congratulations. And for Kevin, I have a question about the creative process of Vitae. That Vitae is a series of images come out from your imagination, right? Yeah. So where that imagination come from? Where did the image come from? What inspired you?
So I think what inspired me was primarily so the process started with me kind of putting together 16 descriptions of images that were composed of keywords of pictures that I would be interested in bringing on stage, and it kind of drew entirely from my previous dance experience. So in some sense, like Vitae is, it's most commonly used in like CV or resume, or like what you've done through your entire life. So the piece is kind of representative of my dancing life, in that all of these images are drawn from specific moments that drawn from my previous dance experience. And so from there, I took those images and I looked at how can we expand on these images, and how can we bring them to life with a much larger group of people that gives me kind of the freedom to create images that a single body or two bodies wouldn't have been able to create otherwise.
So for Gareth, what is your process of composing? Is that you talked with Kevin first, and then did you have a chance to see the performer's movement, or how does it build up?
Thank you. It was a very humbling experience, first of all, because this is my first time composing for a dance piece. So it was an exciting process, actually quite unlike any other processes that I've had the privilege of experiencing. So as Kevin said, he had these original ideas, 16 images that came out of his own experience. And originally, I only had those 16 words to work with. Yeah, it was it started off as very, very vague and exploration based, which was fantastic because Kevin and I got a chance to bounce ideas off of each other. What might work tonally, what might not work. It was an interesting process also because I couldn't see the dance before I started composing the work, just because of how scheduling worked. So once I could see the dance, then it was a matter of stitching the 16 pieces, I guess, of separate music together, how to make them feel somewhat from the same performance. So there was a lot of back and forth on that.
Yeah. Got it. Okay, so it's a question for everyone. I would like to know that what was the process for you, for performers, like how to create together, and what was the most joyful moment, or any enlightened moment if you had?
So I think when we started the project, it started off really slow. We started getting to know each other, and as it went on, I think we started to create this energy between all of us that you could feel growing as the project went on. And by the time we were able to present it here on stage, it just felt like we were so in sync as we developed the piece, and when we actually got to present it, it felt really good.
To just second what Tona said in the beginning, we'd come to the studio and Kevin would have us do some exercises for an hour, and I was like, what is he trying to do? When are we getting to the dance? But then in the end, I figured out what was the reason for that, because I feel like by the time we were doing dress rehearsal, we knew that we are all one body and one thing, that we're not just doing something, oh, let me do this move because it's gonna look cool. I feel like we were doing stuff because we felt ourselves in the space, and I thought it was really beneficial. So yeah, that really helped. And I really appreciated how Kevin took time to listen to us and see how we feel about whatever we were doing, and what we thought it meant and what we wanted to do. So he didn't restrict us, okay, this is this move and this is where you have to stop. And if you go further beyond this point, you're not in the performance. Like, that wasn't the thing. Like, he would let us explore as much as we could, and then he would say, okay, this looks good, this probably you should think about something else. So I really like that.
Yeah, and just to add to that, I think the first couple of weeks we were also not only exploring how we feel in relationship to each other, but also how we feel in our own dance. And there was something which was very beneficial for me because I never was professionally trained in dance. So those first couple of rehearsals when Kevin just played music and did some exercises with us and just let us explore on our own, like what our style looks like was very valuable for me.
I think something that I really appreciated was in the audition even, everyone felt very comfortable with each other. We had that first exercise where we lay down on the floor, all of us together, and we visualized where we were. And we did that at the beginning of every rehearsal, and that always put us in the mindset of we're ready to be here, we're ready to be together and do this together. So I always appreciated that at the beginning.
So the last question is, so Kevin is I should introduce in the beginning. Kevin is a common choreographer, the director, Gareth composer, and then tonal performer, and Alex performer, and Kate performer, and Cameron performer. So what was the most challenging moment in your role?
I think for me the most challenging moment is really kind of echoing what Alexandra said earlier. That is that I'm working with a group of dancers who don't have a shared training of dance. So that means that even if I were to come in with a specific set of choreography, the way each of them would learn it and would perform it would be different. And so that meant that I couldn't just come in and be like, we're gonna do exactly this set of movement. And so what came to be is, I loosely call this piece contemporary, but it's not really necessarily contemporary. I don't have any ballet training. I don't have any contemporary training, but I call it contemporary because it's a more accessible form of movement. I would probably call this more like a movement piece because I think what I'm more interested in is how each individual body moves. And so navigating through that challenge of really needing to get to know these bodies before seeing what images I can put together or how I can interpret these 16 images that I want to create was probably the most difficult part of the process for me.
As I said, it was my first time composing for a dance piece. And I think as we solidified the choreography, the collaboration with Kevin became more and more complex because I would be given these ideas of 16 images, and I would compose a kind of progression through every single image. And then based on the needs of the choreography, I would either have to add beats or subtract beats, which was difficult because I'd already had an idea of how the melody would start and end in a set number of beats, right? So now that Kevin would be like, I want 4 8 beats extra at the end, just add something. I would have to figure out how to add those 4 8 beats and make them make sense with the rest of the 16 or 12 or 23 8 beats that were there. And because once I would change it, we would try it with the choreography, and then sometimes we would have to edit it again. So it was a lot of recomposing. That was interesting.
I think for me the hardest part was finding the confidence to go into a dance show where there isn't a set piece in which Kevin would come in with an idea and then we would have to add from our own experience. And I think finding the comfort in myself and like the bravery to start doing movements regardless of what they would look like was the toughest part.
For me, it was getting comfortable with improvisation. So I remember a couple of first rehearsals, Kevin was like, oh, just listen to music and improvise now. And I was like, how you are supposed to do this? Just tell me what I should do. So it took some time to get comfortable in the space and get comfortable with myself as well. And to just really let my body move in a way I feel like.
So for me, I think to second what you said also was quite challenging to just come in and be like, okay, actually haven't met Kevin before we started working together, so I was like, okay, this is a choreography that is not existent yet, but it's coming to life and I'm part of it and I'm doing this commitment, so yeah, that was one thing. But then another thing was I'm dancing mostly on my own, so I'm just freestyling, doing hip hop and everything. And then to just have the patience of knowing that like, okay, I'm not in control of this actually. Like I'm not the one controlling everything, so I have to, you know, kind of get used to the fact that I'm not the only one. So yeah, that was challenging.
Definitely improv. It's just like you go and then you have to go and you can't judge yourself. Otherwise you're like, oh no! So that was constantly something that I think we all dealt with or challenged ourselves with during the dance.
Also, you might not know, but one of our dancers got injured a day before the performance. So Kevin had a difficult moment when he had to fill in for her. So I just wanted to mention it and thank Kevin for doing such an amazing job. Moment.
All right, I open up the question for audience. Is there any questions?
You briefly mentioned all the dancers did, like improvisation. So what was the collaborative process like when you choreograph? Like how much were the dancers involved and how was the process like?
Right. Okay. So let's say, for example, the first pile that is formed on stage when the dancers group in one by one, it started out as an exercise that Kiori actually introduced to me, I think like 2 years ago now, and it's really simple. We start sitting in a circle. One person enters the space in the center and puts up an interesting shape with a lot of like curves, edges, and holes that other people can add onto. And then the task given is that each dancer is to enter the center and then add on to the shape provided by the first dancer. So then the shape kind of builds up, and builds up. So the way the pile started, it was workshopping through that exercise. And then through that exercise, I look for moments and ways of setting up the bodies that I feel like is something that I would like to present on stage, and that is something that they're comfortable with. And then later on in the process, I then set the positions of the body, how they're shaped in the space, and how the order in which they come in, the order in which they get thrown off at.
Thank you. This has been fabulous, really fabulous. So you described this process of improvisation, and yet when the dance or the movement piece looks very cohesive in terms of movement vocabulary. In other words, the dancers are sharing ways of moving that uses body weight and flow and some contact. How does that get established, since it could be any movement vocabulary?
So in addition to starting with kind of that meditative moment of self-release at the start of each rehearsal, I also try to do a warm-up activity called Cross the Floor, and the concept is simple. One person leads a movement across the floor, and everyone else needs to copy that movement to the best of their ability. So for the first couple of weeks, I led each section of Cross the Floor, but at the midpoint of the process, I switched it over so that at each session, one of the dancers would lead it, and so through that moment of Cross the Floor, we have a moment of learning some shared movement, but that isn't necessarily choreography. And when each dancer leads Cross the Floor for themselves, I do encourage them to introduce some of their own movement as well, so that we all can kind of learn a bit from each other's dance styles, because we all kind of come from different backgrounds of dance.
Congratulations, Kevin. It's been so long since you've been talking about this idea, and I'm curious because the other experiences I had with you, you're performing in all of your work, and I'm wondering now that you've gone through this process, and especially tonight, watching it and not performing in it, how that experience was for you.
I like it. The original reason I chose not to perform in it was I didn't want my own dance style to affect my choreography that much, because I think if I place myself in the piece, I'm going to set up moments to utilize certain movements that I'm able to do. And because I come from a background of breakdancing, and breakdancing is not really a dance style that many people can learn very quickly, that can make the choreography much more inaccessible for the entire ensemble. So that was the biggest reason why I chose to step out. And I think having been able to have this opportunity to really just sit back and watch for once, I think was really exciting. I really enjoyed it. I think I want to do this again at some point. Yeah.
So the piece was great. Congratulations to all of you, and also Leslie, who's I guess upstairs somewhere. Congrats. The lights were great too. I want to build on that because I was surprised that there wasn't any breakdancing. It was kind of coming in. I was kind of expecting a certain vocabulary, and it was very different. And I think it was great. And hearing a little bit about the process and how you drew from sort of other workshops and other experiences you've had here to create this new group. This group choreography. In your last answer before that, you made a distinction between choreography and movement. And I'm actually wondering if you might talk a little bit about where that boundary lies for you and what that difference is between the movement that you were doing and the choreography that you were doing.
So I would say that in that answer, I was describing choreography in more of a like what most people expect to be choreography, which is, your hand goes out this moment, comes up, comes down, left shoulder, and so on. But I do agree that like movement can be described as choreography as well. And I think for me, the line is drawn at how much of the choreography do I take off of the dancers, as in how much of it is I come in and this is exactly what we do, and that's the choreography. And how much of it is I come in, I bring an image that I want to create, I have some ideas of activities that can work towards that image. I try those activities. If they don't work, then I throw them out, and I try another angle of attack at creating this image. And then I think at some point I've been able to reach satisfaction between bouncing off of the dancer's movements in eventually then shaping the images that I brought on stage.
So I think we're all wondering this. What does the red cloth symbolize?
Okay. So the red cloth, so I talked about curriculum vitae, CV, marking, your dancing career. So the red cloth is actually, you may have noticed that at first you might have been following the male body in the center of the space, but at some point the center of focus shifts away from that male body, who was of course Tona, onto other bodies. And so the piece of red cloth is essentially tracking the focus of the piece. So rather than kind of looking at following a body through space, you're following the red cloth through space, and the red cloth is being represented by various bodies, and so it's kind of like a concept that is actively transforming and adapting throughout the piece. And for me, it actually, midway through the process of putting together my images, I realized that the images and the ordering of them closely matched kind of my own mental state coming into like this year before developing the project. And so like the red cloth is following how my mind has been feeling and moving along as I developed this piece. So starting from kind of an exploration and entry into a new world and birth type of thing, because this is my first time really choreographing a more extended piece, and then moving into a stage of like development and growth and evolution, and then finally kind of descending into one final moment of chaos and intenseness. And just for me, like, you know, of course the process went much smoother than expected, but definitely coming into this semester and knowing that this is a semester that I execute what I've been planning this past year was very scary for me to really approach. Yeah, so that would be what the red cloth kind of follows.
So I was wondering, okay, it works. I was wondering, like when you told that this is the image I want to see, and then the dancers would perform some image. How did you put them all together? Because every image would be different, I guess.
So it's not so much as I want the feeling of home and I make them just do whatever. It's more like I will have exercises that have, you know, pretty clear directions to kind of the mood that I want to create that will help guide them step by step into it. And it's I don't think I've done much individual, aside from solos. I don't think I ever go like, okay, we're gonna split up into, we're gonna take the next 10 minutes, each person needs to come up with, you know, like 20 seconds worth of movement for this specific image. It's always let's create this image together.
Are we done?
We have time for one more question. Something for them.
I just wanted to add one comment real quick. So what was interesting, I thought, about the movement/choreography type of question, because for me, I used to, when I dance together with people, it's always choreography and it's a competition. So you compete, and then it has to be strict and everyone has to do the same thing. So what happened here, we would move on with the choreography or with the movements, and I would ask Kevin, so what do you think about the dance? What do you think about the dance? And I was expecting to hear, okay, like this leg is not there and like that arm. But he would never tell this in this way because I feel like he respected the fact that everyone is different in the way they move. So he would only emphasize on the conceptualization of that movement. He would only say, okay, this looked like, I want you to feel whatever you're doing more and I want it to be more intentional. Also, Kiori was saying that to us. But he would never say, I want you to move in a different way completely because I don't like how it looks. So I thought that was really cool.
I also wanted to add to, sorry, when Kevin was describing how this whole piece represents his journey and it ends with chaos, I just wanted to say that it never felt like chaos to us. And just Kevin's commitment and drive that he brought to every single rehearsal was so inspiring for us. And I think that was what got us through. I just wanted to thank you for it.
Well, thank you everyone so much for coming. It's been a pleasure to have you here. I know I'm a mysterious new face. I'm Ethan. So yeah, thank you to Kevin and the team. Thank you to Sarah and the rest of the Art Center team. And thank you for coming. Thank you to Bill for being Bill and bringing amazing art to this art center, and for including us in this year's program. And Lindsay too for helping us along the way. Enjoy your evening, and we hope to see you back soon.